While the embattled National Police Commissioner Khehla Sitole has refuted allegations by the Independent Police Investigative Directorate IPID that he failed to cooperate with a crucial investigation into the murder of anti-gang unit Lieutenant Colonel Charl Kinnear, calls are now growing louder that this issue is addressed immediately. Now, to talk about this, we are now joined by Eldred de Klerk, who is a policing expert and director of the African Centre for Security and Intelligence Praxis. Mr. de Klerk, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us and a warm welcome to The Full View.
Thank you very much and thanks for having me.
Is there any indication at this point, perhaps, that President Ramaphosa will suspend the commissioner, given that President Ramaphosa himself had already signalled an intention to suspend Sitole while a board of inquiry probed his fitness to hold office?
Well, we really have to separate the issues of IPID and non-compliance with statutory obligations to assist IPID in any investigation and to make sure that anything material to an investigation is made available to them and that you present yourself to them. That can lead to a criminal inquiry, possible fine or jail term if found guilty. And then the fitness for office and the issue of a loss of confidence in the executive director, or sorry, the head of the South African Police Service as the accounting officer. I apologize. That is on the president's table for a while now. And we do look to the president to have applied his mind to say, is this an exacerbating factor that adds to the already onerous burden on the national commissioner to prove his fitness for office and to ensure that there's no further erosion of confidence in his office and in the police. If that is so, then we do want the president to move expeditiously and decisively to resolve this within the boundaries of the law, because the burden of proof of a loss of confidence and fitness for office is far less than one of a criminal inquiry. So we would hope that the president moves speedily to resolve this uncertainty that at the moment is hanging around the head of the National Commissioner like a sword.
And IPID has the unenviable task of investigating police officers who are, the primary law enforcement agencies, agents in South Africa. And it does have the constitutional mandate, as it were, as an independent body according to the Constitution. And the entity also had, the international obligations to fight against corruption. And with that said, Mr. de Klerk, and with the foregoing matter of the commissioner ostensibly refusing to cooperate with IPID investigations, who then bears the honours of ensuring that there's cooperation between the two entities and with consequences for failure to cooperate?
Well, there is both the criminal charge of that failure to cooperate, and IPID has proceeded around the laying a criminal charge for the case number, and that has to be investigated by the merits of that as outlined in their charge sheet. And they are investigators and accomplished investigations, so I'm sure that they would have prepared a docket for the state prosecutor to pursue. However, this issue is political. Government and policymakers and the executive has to ensure that there's strategic direction, that there's stability, and that policies are upheld. The South African Police Service forms part of the Department of Police that houses the ministry, the IPID, the Civilian Secretariat, SERA, and the South African Police. So one of the first ports of call would be the cabinet minister responsible, namely the Minister of Police, who would then, in conversation with the principal, who's the president, consider the fate of the National Commissioner. The minister has already asked the president to pursue a case of no confidence and not fit for office. So the minister has made his views known. So now, unfortunately, it's incumbent upon the executive to make that decision and actually proceed to ask the National Commissioner. They've already asked him, he has a case to heard. We don't know what he said in reply. And what we would like to now is for the president to say, like I said earlier, I've applied my mind and this is the decision I've made.
Now, for purposes of understanding whether IPID has the potential to be an effective oversight mechanism to ensure accountability in respect of SAPS, who watches them? Who
watches IPID? Well, IPID can only make recommendations, unfortunately. They don't have the clout to pursue a case all the way to court and to implement their recommendations. Unfortunately, that is given to provincial commissioners, handed over to the national commissioners, and it's up to them to pursue based on the investigation and then the recommendation of IPID. Mm-hmm. That is the unfortunate thing. What we would like to see then is a body that has the ability to work, to prepare a case, investigate it, and then inform the principals of the police, but then hands it over to the National Prosecuting Authority to see whether, in fact, the work that IPID has done yields the basis of enough evidence to pursue criminal or other charges against the South African police or Metro Police officer.
Now, let's talk about the office of the National Commissioner. What seems to go wrong in that office, considering that the last few police commissioners left under a cloud? I mean, Khehla Sitole himself and his future is uncertain. His predecessor, Khomoso Phahlane, Ria Pierga, and even the incumbent police minister himself, Bheki Cele, vacated the office unceremoniously. Would you point the problem to interference or simply incompetence?
Well, political interference is a very difficult one to judge because that assumes that somewhere the executive has the ability to influence the police and the top cop of the country to pursue very narrow political interests, be that party political interest or the interest of a few cohorts within the executive. That is almost unlikely because we have very clear policy prescripts. What we seem to have is we have national commissioners who seem to ignore the very policy that they swore to uphold. They seem to undermine the institution and its legislative framework. They seem to ignore the ideology and the values that the South African Constitution has been based on, and they seem to ignore the rules of the game. When they do that, in fact, they're then undermining the state and the very democracy that they've sworn to uphold. You cannot have a national commissioner willy-nilly saying, I won't present myself to answer questions. I will not participate in a process. And when he or she refuses to do so, we do nothing because those rules of the game applies to all of us. So whether it's political interference, which I doubt it is in the narrow sense that somebody has appointed somebody simply to do their bidding, or whether it's a systemic, unfortunately, coordinated effort to undermine the ability of the South African Police Service to be effective and to fulfill its constitutional mandate. That is the more worrying trend that we see. The ANC has sought to dub that a counter-revolution. In intelligence terms and security terms, we call that a counter-systemic threat. And we should be wary that the narrative of simply a failing police and police interference, political interference or factional infighting obfuscates and distracts us from the very real intent of a few to undermine the effectiveness of the national security architecture so that they can continue with whatever broad agenda they have. Because we would like a national police commissioner that can both uphold the Constitution and be competent enough to tackle the biggest problem in South Africa, which is economic, and a lack of development and a lack of growth. And the South African Police Service as an institution should lend itself to fulfill the constitutional mandate of equality of life for all of South African people in a free, secure, and safe South Africa.
And what's more unfortunate is that the problems experienced at the top will filter down, to affect policing on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. de Klerk.
My pleasure.
That was Eldred de Klerk, a policing expert and director of the African Centre for Security and Intelligence Praxis. Western Cape Premier